Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I want to show you my current sketching palette, and I have two different sketching palettes here since I usually use one in the studio for every day kind of painting work, and then I have one in my sketching bag. And as you can see, the palettes themselves are a little bit different from each other, and also the color choices are slightly different but mostly the same. So last year, 2020, has been a year for me of using up paints, and I went through a lot of changes with these small sketching palettes. I changed a lot of the colors, and I didn't show every single change in my palette. I didn't post this on my blog because I thought it would just be confusing. And I have to say now I have more or less settled into a palette setup that I like. And I have one small field kit. I'm going to show it to you here so that you can get an idea. So I have one of these small field kits for everyday use, and the rest of the paints that I own has been consolidated into a large wooden studio palette and I will show this in another video, how I made this and what's in it. So I've gone back to using mostly half pens to fit in more colors. There was a time when I used these bigger full pens, and I still have some of them for the most used colors that I have in here, or just colors that were already in these full pens. And then the rest of them, you can see I have mostly these small half pens. And I originally had thought that this would be impractical with larger brushes, but then I find if I'm really careful, it doesn't destroy the brushes, and I'm more flexible and I'm quicker when it comes to mixing. And in the field, I don't want to spend all my time mixing colors, so I want to react quickly and just pick up the color that I see is fitting and then maybe change it a little bit. But I really like this setup of having about 20 colors, and in this other palette, I will open it too, are around, I think, 18 or 17 colors. So that has proven for me to be a very versatile and very practical palette setup. So I still follow this basic palette setup of having a warm and a cool version of each primary color, then earth tones and an opaque white. And what you can see here and here are custom pens, very small pens that I made myself from polymer clay, and I thought it would be nice to fill up these spaces and to have a few more choices that I don't need all the time, really these sort of special colors. So this is a cobalt green, and for these I just took colors that I would use anyway. So then let's take a look at each of the individual colors and in each palette, and I think I can do this at the same time because overall these two palettes are not that different. You can see that I have not as many colors in this palette, and this is simply down to how I arranged it and how I put them in here. So this palette has this metal insert, so most of these metal palettes come with this insert. And you can see it takes up a little bit of space, so you have these spaces here. If you don't want this, you can just take out the metal insert and then put in your colors like I did here. So I have something that is called Blue Tack, which is this sort of rubbery stuff that sticks materials together, and I just put it in all of the spaces here on the bottom. And another thing that I did was I added magnetic tape on each of the pens, so they will stick even better. One downside of this is that the magnet tape will attract a little bit of rust, so that's unfortunately something that's a side effect with this technique. But I have to say, the pens are really fixed well in these palettes, so I can turn it around and nothing will happen. So they are really secured very well. And I think I even did the same thing here. So yes, I added a little bit of magnetic tape to the pans here too. So let's take a look at the individual colors. As you can see, I have a titanium white, a gouache white in each of these. And before I go out painting, or if I start a new painting session, I like to top it up with fresh paint, because gouache needs a lot of water and it's best used fresh. But it's a really good choice to have if you want to add highlights. You can also mix this with the rest of the colors, and then you get a slightly opaque, slightly pastel-y version of your color that you can put on top of dark areas. And this is really practical. So it's sort of a mixed media palette, really, because you have this choice of white gouache. And the rest of these color choices is, as I said, following this approach of having a cool and a warm version of each color, and then a few additional extras. So over here would be my lemon yellow and chromium yellow deep, so a cool and warm yellow. And I will leave a list below so you can have a look, take a look at the individual colors. In the other palette here, I still have a few pans that I want to use up. So here I have transparent yellow for the cool version, and I believe this is a gamboge for the warm yellow, but I'm not sure about this one. It could also be Turner's yellow. I'm actually not sure. But so if you use this transparent yellow in a very thin mix, then you get a very almost lemon yellow. And if you apply it a little bit thicker, then it turns into a warm version. Then in this palette, I have an additional chromium orange, which is really practical if you don't want to mix orange, so for orange flowers, and it sort of bridges this gap between the yellows and the reds. And sometimes it's hard to mix a clean orange. You can see I didn't have space for an orange in this pan, and probably when I finish this full pan of red, then I will change it to 2 half pans maybe. Then we have the warm and the cool red, and this is vermilion and perylene maroon, also both by Schmincke. So this cool red is my alternative for the traditional alizarin crimson, which is fugitive, so it's not light fast. You have to pay a little bit attention when you use or buy alizarin crimson, because some brands offer it and they still offer the traditional color. And so this can be a color that's not light fast. An alternative, and I believe it's I've used it in this palette here, could be Schmincke Madder Red Deep, which is actually a mix of 2 pigments, but I don't find this particularly bad, or it doesn't make a difference when I'm mixing. So there are some brands that offer permanent alizarin crimson, which is a great choice. So just pay a bit of attention when using this sort of dark red. And then I have my basic magenta tone, which is Schmincke Ruby Red in both of these cases. And this is basically what they call their quinacridone pink. In the next row, the arrangement of the paints is a little bit different. I'll just follow this row, this arrangement. So I'm starting with Phthalo Blue. This is a really intense blue that's great for mixing, also great as a sky color, but you have to use it really sparingly. Then I have Dioxazine Violet. This is also a great color for mixing. It's a transparent purple. It's great for shadows, great for adding into other colors. On the other palette, I have an alternative that you could use. This is Cobalt Violet. And this is not as staining, it's not as intense, it's more like a soft version of it, and it's also granulating. So this is a lighter choice, a softer choice for this kind of violet color. Then in this palette, I have this little custom pan of Winsor and Newton Cobalt Green, which is a color that I don't use that often, but it's still nice to have it here in this very small pan. And I saw this space and I thought, why not add in this color because sometimes it's nice to have. You can treat it as a blue-green color and then mix it from there. Then I have here Cerulean Blue. This is also from Winsor & Newton. I typically use the Winsor & Newton colors if they are less expensive for me than the Schmincke colors. So this is mainly a price choice, not a quality choice. So all of these brands that I mentioned here, Schmincke and Winsor and I don't know, maybe Daniel Smith, all of these make great colors and great pigments, so you don't have to worry about quality for any of these. So the Cerulean Blue is a really beautiful sky blue. It's slightly granulating and yeah, it's also really nice for mixing into other colors and mixing neutrals from it. Then we have the absolute classic, the ultramarine blue. I don't know any painter who doesn't have ultramarine in their palette. So this is, you can do a lot of things with it. You can use it on its own, which is also a really nice dark sky blue. You can use it for mixing with earth tones and you can get really interesting neutrals that way. And you can of course mix it with any other color. And yeah, it's just a really versatile, really, really great color overall. Then for the greens, I usually have 3 different greens in my palette. Let's start here with the sap green. This is, I believe, the Schmincke sap green, and in this palette I have the Winsor & Newton sap green. And I actually prefer this one because it's not as garish and as intense. It's a bit more natural. All of that said, usually I mix something else into the greens before I apply them to the page. And the same goes for this phthalo green. I mean, look at this color. It's not even a natural color. So you absolutely have to mix in something else, maybe an earth tone or a little bit of the reds to get a usable green. And for this, it's great. The phthalos are really great mixing pigments, and they are part of a lot of these convenience colors. And for a light green, I have this May green, it's called, it's by Schmincke. And I really like this for having a warm, bright green, especially in spring when you have all of the fresh foliage. And I really like using this for these kind of light, fresh flower greens or foliage greens. In the last row, I have my earth tones and darks, and I usually have some sort of yellow ochre or raw sienna. Any of these are fine. I believe in this palette it's actually a raw umber, which is also fine. It's less yellow. You can see the difference here. It's a bit different, but it still works as a light earth tone. And this is great for landscapes, great for mixing, great for shades and these just making colors more neutral. So this is very versatile. Then I have burnt sienna, and this is a warm earth tone, a warm red, which is also very useful for mixing a really traditional landscape color. Try mixing it with, I'm sure you already know this, with ultramarine blue. This is a really traditional combination. You can get really nice neutrals out of this. In this palette, I actually have an alternative, which is called Mahogany Brown. It's a different pigment, and it's granulating. It has less of these intense red tones, but it gives really interesting effects. And so sometimes it's not optimal for mixing neutrals or darks, but somehow I like it, and it has found its way into this palette. Then as an additional choice for a warm brown, I have burnt umber here, Schmincke burnt umber, which is a bit cooler and a bit darker than the burnt sienna. So if you want less red, then you could use this burnt umber. You can see here it's slightly more neutral, slightly more brown. And I don't have this one in this palette. So in this palette I have a Daniel Smith raw umber, which I use as a cool brown. And for this palette, I simply use the Sepia by Schmincke, which is also a dark, cool brown and good for toning down colors, toning down mixes for fur or for feathers. Also, it's a really great dark for landscapes if you don't want this really black or dark gray. You can use this to tone down your colors. And the last one in these two palettes is my choice for a dark. This is Payne's Gray. I believe this is from Winsor, maybe it's from Schmincke. I honestly don't remember, but it doesn't make much difference. So this is a very traditional color. It's a dark gray. You could also use other darks. I have tried Neutral Gray by Schmincke, which is also fine. It doesn't have any black pigment in it, which can be an advantage. And then I believe in here is some color that I don't even remember. Maybe St. Petersburg, maybe Sennelier. Because it has honey in it, it's also a Payne's Gray. And I will be so happy when it's used up because it tends to stick on my fingers and it goes everywhere in this palette. So I have to say I don't use the dark very often, except when I have an object that I want to paint that's really black or really dark in itself. So if the local color is black. And otherwise for shadow areas, I prefer to use the other colors in my palette and maybe purples or blues or even these earth tones, because this makes for much more natural looking dark and shadow areas. So these are all of the colors in my small sketching palettes, and I find that with these color choices I can cover a really big range of subjects. You know, I mostly sketch nature, wildlife, also landscapes. It's really great for landscapes, but also scenes that have buildings in them, even portraits, yeah, or whatever else I encounter on my travels or on my hikes. And I also really like these small metal palettes since they're so versatile, and as you could see, you can set them up in a different way and get different arrangements and there are different ways to fill these palettes and make them your own. So these kind of metal palettes have served me well for years. They're really sturdy, they're lightweight, and they're not expensive at all. I have already written a few things and made videos about how to set up your palette and how to make your own custom palette, and I will leave all of these links below. And if you're looking into setting up your custom palette based on this video, then I'd like to bring to your attention a video class called Setting Up a Custom Sketching Palette with Watercolor. So I made this class as an introduction to watercolor palettes, much like this video here, but it goes much deeper into the topics. So I talk about pigments, color theory, and yeah, we'll look into how you can really assemble your own palette from scratch. And yeah, we'll also talk about mixing, about layout options for different palettes, and then I share what I look for when I'm choosing colors for my sketching palette. And I've already talked about this a little bit here, and we'll go much deeper into this in the class. So I will leave a link for that class in the info box. If you're interested, that's great. If not, don't take this as pressure to buy anything. I will always make these free videos and make this information available freely, but yeah, you can really support my work and support my free videos with yeah, the purchase of these classes from me. Yeah, and that's basically it. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'd really love to hear from you what your palette looks like, how you have set it up, and as always, feel free to comment, like, and subscribe. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you very soon. Bye!